This is going to be my presentation or my persuasive presentation over minimum wage and kind of what's the point and what we can do to help get that raised. So, how much does it cost to flip a patty? This is kind of like the first question that a lot of people go to whenever they think of minimum wage is a entry level, basic level, no skills required type of job. And this is kind of like the starting problem that I believe a lot of people have with the conversation over minimum wage is that people flipping burgers or having a job that doesn't take a lot of skill to do shouldn't be paid a whole lot. When in all reality, whenever they first made minimum wage a federal mandate, it is supposed to be the minimum wage for a decent living, not just for just barely getting by. And so this quote by Franklin Roosevelt shows exactly what I'm trying to say. So, no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of a decent living. And in the next couple of slides, we're going to be looking at the cost of living versus the minimum wage. And I'll kind of go through the 1950s, the 1990s, and the 2020. And the cost of living is going to be bare bones examination of just the average home price. It's not going to include any type of bills, medical expenses, student expenses, anything like that. So it's just strictly going to be the average home cost. So the cost of living in the 1950s, the average home purchase was about $7,000. When adjusted for inflation, that is going to be closer to about 80 grand. And in the 1990s, it was about 80 grand, which adjusted for inflation is about 157, and that is up 99% in those 40 years. In 2020, that average home purchase has jumped dramatically by 326% to about 336,000. And in the next slide, you'll definitely see that the minimum wage has not caught up to that at all. In the 1950s, the minimum wage is only 75 cents, but when adjusted for inflation, it's roughly about 8.25 an hour, which is about 17 grand a year. And in the 1990s, it sort of met the trend. It went up by 7.7%. When adjusted for inflation, that number jumped to 8.94. So it was still kind of a bit on the rise. You could still um, or purchase that average home purchase with a minimum wage balance. However, in 2020, it is down to 725, which it looks like a lot more on paper, but whenever you adjust those numbers for inflation, it's actually down 13.8%. And looking at the debt to income ratio, if you don't know anything about debt to income ratio, that is what mortgage lenders do to give you a loan if you don't have the purchase price of, $336,000, which not a lot of people have. So in order to secure that loan, the mortgage lenders look at your debt to income ratio to determine if you're able to pay for the loan. And 43 is pretty much the cutoff for that. So 43%, anything higher, they're not going to approve you for the loan at all. Anything lower than that, they'll consider you depending upon other factors. But generally, that's what they go based off of. And so in the 1950s, based on the minimum wage and the average home purchase, your debt to income ratio would be about 15%, which is well below that 43% in order to secure that mortgage loan. In the 1990s, it jumped a little bit up to 28%, which is still below the 43. And in 2020, it is up to 74%, which means if you have two full-time minimum wage jobs working 80 hours a week for the full 52 weeks a year, you're barely going to be able to cut that. And still, like I said before, that's not even including other expenses like electric bills, water bills, gas bills, phone bills, anything else like that. This is strictly just the cost of living to purchase a home on minimum wage. So there has been proposed minimum wages for about $15 per hour. That's about 31 grand per year. And when looking at that debt to income ratio, it jumps it down to 36% rather than that 74% we were looking at earlier. And 36% is still a little high, but is definitely within that range below that 43% that mortgage lenders look at. So that is definitely a huge plus when considering that $15 an hour really isn't that high of a wage considering what you had to pay for it to live in this country. So, with this being a business focused class, what does this mean for your business? A lot of businesses have had this sign since COVID up, and a lot of employees just aren't working there. They have had a lot of layoffs, or they just don't want to work there anymore because they're not paying that livable wage like we are talking about. And a lot of it's due to the staff shortage, and a lot of it has to do with the minimum wage. They're paying their employees the minimum to get by, and it affects the business a lot. So the effects of raising those wages would mean that those less desirable jobs will be filled. Flipping patties, nobody wants to do that for 7.25 an hour when they know that they're not going to be able to pay their rent at the end of the day. So jumping that raise those wages up to $15 an hour means those jobs would be get filled. Those businesses would be open, they would be productive in the economy, and also mental health would increase due to the lack of financial stress. When you're happy outside of work, you'll be happy inside of work. So those employees will come back and they'll want to work for you as long as they're making that livable wage. And despite what many of the experts have said, um, in the very beginning, this will affect the economy and it will stimulate it. And a quick example that I was going to give is that Forbes.com, 74% of the first stimulus checks were used for spending, and not a lot of frivolous spending, although that was some of the case, but 74% of Americans used that first stimulus check to purchase bills, get back on their rent, get everything that was past due on their bills. The other percentage, about 26%, that was mainly used for paying off other debts like student loans or medical expenses, and some of them even put that back. But the majority, a good three-fourths of that, was using that stimulus check for spending because they were not paid enough or did not have the cash funds to live off of. And so, what does this mean for your business? Your business that you own or a business that you are running on a part of a company? Some of the positive from raising wages is employee retention, and owning a business or being in that position to know of managing a business knows that employee retention is highly, highly regarded because you don't want to lose an employee that is productive. You don't want to lose an employee that is bringing in cash sales for your company. And whenever you lose that employee, you have to replace them with somebody who doesn't know the job. You have to train them from ground up, more than likely. And you'll see that your productivity is going to go down and your engagement with the employees are going to go down. You have to build a whole new relationship with that employee. And according to Forbes.com, it costs a company 33% of that lost employee's salary to replace and train a new one. So if he was making about 100 grand a year, just for easy numbers sake, um, it would cost the company $33,000 just to replace that one employee that was making that much money to be able to train and find a new one to get back to where they were before. And so, what could you do? Um, in all aspects of this, just think when you vote, when you are looking at a candidate, think about the platform they're on, um, what they're going to do for minimum wage. Some of them support the $15 an hour minimum wage increase, some of them don't. And also, could I keep this employee here with a simple pay raise? More often than not, an employee would leave due to the lack of benefits or the lack of pay or work life balance. And a lot of that could just be a simple, I'm going to this place over here, they pay X amount of dollars. And before you let that employee walk out the door, just ask yourself, could I match that salary? to keep this employee here. Um, and that also includes benefits. Maybe they're leaving this company because they want to find another company that has better health insurance. They have better work-life balance that allows them to have that mental health that they're looking for. So just kind of ask yourself that question. And also, it goes in the hand with, am I allowing my employees to earn a decent living wage? That is going to be more of a moral question that you have to ask yourself. If you know that some of your employees aren't able to pay rent, are you paying them enough? Like, if they're only getting paid that 7.25 an hour or $10 an hour, are they making enough to live comfortably to be able to pay their rent, pay their bills, and come to work every day knowing that they can actually earn a decent living wage? And probably the last thing you can ask yourself is, could offering better benefits and pay keep my employees happy inside of outside of work? This goes a lot hand in hand with um, the mental health that we're dealing with recently. A lot of the mental health crisis is employees aren't able to, pay for themselves. They're not able to provide for their families, and simply just adding benefits or increasing that pay could keep your employees happy, keep your business up and running. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys.